Hi, and welcome back to Gender Studies. This week we're going to look at gendered education. And I'm going to remind you again, although much of this issues in this chapter in our textbooks are American focused, but many of the issues still do apply to Canada. And again, as a reminder, in Canada, our Charter of Rights and Freedoms protect us for some of that discrimination, but that does not mean that there are no inequalities. Now, some of these inequalities are ingrained institutionally. Some institutions, like in education, families, politics, media, religion, some of these all are ingrained with some of this approach to how we view gender in this institution, education. Now we're going to begin with looking at gendered experiences and the pressures facing students. And we'll start with the gendered expectations and pressures feeling the students and academics. Now, basically what we can say here is that all students encounter gendered expectations and pressures in schools from kindergarten onward. And for our purposes in this, we'll follow along with the textbook, and we're going to begin with the males and some of the key affects on them. Now, again, I'm going to emphasize that this isn't necessarily always your experience or even my experience, although it's more likely more my experience because I'm older than most of you, in fact, probably all of you. So we have to look at these issues as transitioning. So some of us will see this to be wholly our experiences. Others might see this being something not like our own experience, and others might recognize this as being totally not theirs. So bear in mind that this is still research-based evidence being provided when I go through these sorts of comments, okay? Young boys tend to have more physical energy and less impulse control than girls. And in addition, their verbal skills do mature later. Now, these developmental differences can make it difficult for young boys to sit quietly and follow instructions all the time. Elementary school classrooms may be very boy-friendly, may not be particularly boy-friendly if the expectations are that you got to sit still and be quiet. Now, these challenges may affect success later in school. More women attend college and pursue postgraduate and graduate studies than do men. Personal choices certainly play a role in academic success. Boys and men spend less time preparing for classes and more time in their leisure activities. Male students tend to fall behind female students on most markers in academic success. They may be less skilled at reading early because of their the developmental differences between boys and girls. And of course that can have impact if you're not getting all what you need in the beginning part of your academic career, kindergarten to grade 6, then it's going to have an impact in high school and whether or not there's post-secondary. Because they're less skilled at reading early in their elementary school, they are more likely to drop out and less likely to attend college. They're also tend to study less. Now, females, and this is not a separate yet, females have a difficult impact regarding academics as well. The long-standing belief that females are less able to understand math and science have made females' success in these fields more difficult. It's been the feminist movement that's really pushed this. And we see more examples of women excelling in what is known as STEM, S-T-E-M, science, technology, engineering, and math. These beliefs that women can't handle these have affected the evaluation of female skills and lowering their self-confidence and consequently their performance in science and math-related tasks. Females are less likely than males to be encouraged to pursue careers in math and science. If we move into the gender non-conforming student, gender non-conforming students frequently face school practices and policies that are challenging and that can even go as far as to negate the gender non-conforming students' identities. Gender binary norms are pervasive in schools. Remember, gender binary, it's either or, good or bad, men, women, boys, girls. Bathrooms, sports, locker rooms are all divided by sex. So the gender non-conforming wonder, where do I fit? Heterosexuality is the assumption in school curricula, with heterosexual relationships presented as the norm in families and romantic relationships. Sexual orientation can also complicate roommate choices in college. Gender stereotype curricula, while less pervasive than in the past, still exist in today's schools. Women who are highlighted in curricula tend to act in traditional feminine roles or have distinguished themselves in the masculine context using traditional masculine behavior. That just means that if a woman is successful, she can be deemed successful if she, matches and achieves the male standard of what that is, irregardless of what there might be as a female standard, or more balanced, what's the egalitarian standard? History tends to be taught based on how it affects men, but not how it affects women. Science even shows a bias when we consider how reproduction used to be taught in schools. It was focused largely around the male's perspective. Sexism intersects with racism, classism, and heterosexism. White, heterosexual, able-bodied, middle and upper-class men are depicted as the norm, and while others are underrepresented. You can go through, I would suggest, go through a lot of your textbooks and look at the images. You'll find that a number of the images are very gender stereotypical. Either it's predominantly men, or the images of men are in positions of authority, positions of leadership, competency, whereas women are often presented in attractive, nice looking, or in more gender stereotypical for feminine. Check it out, just to sort of see. This partial curriculum limits our understanding of diverse perspectives and accomplishments. It may also encourage men to see themselves as able to influence events and meet high accomplishments, while it discourages women from the same. Now, if we move into the athletics component, moving from academia, but move into athletics within the school system, the U.S. has what's known as a Title IX. It's their legislation that's aimed at providing opportunities and equality for women in athletics at school. Title IX is part of the reason that women have greater opportunities to participate in athletics in the U.S. However, male athletes and their coaches continue to receive much greater support, including financial support. I think Texas is the largest and the football capital of the world. In high school, donors will be building $6 and $10 million stadiums for high school men's football, not women's. Although it's interesting, I'll point this out, the women's soccer has just this week, I think it was. So this would be, I'm making this video, here we are in May, and it was just this week they got agreed to an agreement where what they make to play soccer, it will be equal to that of men. That's a change. Okay. Now, in spite of the efforts to promote fair implementation of Title IX, colleges and universities continue to employ deceptive practices to make it appear that they are meeting the criteria of Title IX when in fact they are not. Participating in sports while in school is linked to higher salaries and better health for women and girls. In Canada, it's the Charter of Rights and Freedoms that help women's athletics of all ages. Women's hockey and the under-18 hockey, women's soccer, and their coach John Herdman. Now, he's not their coach now. John Herdman moved to the men's team, and a woman has moved, Beverly Priestman has moved in to coach the women's soccer team. Gender pressure from peers acceptance is higher when children and young adults conform to gender stereotypes. Pressures to conform to masculinity are stronger for boys than the pressure for girls to conform to femininity. It'll be interesting to see how you might think about that in your more adult life. Is that still true? Boys are expected not to show signs of femininity. During college, male peers often encourage one another to encourage in risky drinking and sexual behaviors to embody the extreme version of masculinity. Pressures to conform to femininity are apparent. Female peer groups reinforce feminine identity in most girls. Now, women and girls encounter sexual objectification and harassment from males, peers, and other adults. Undergraduate college women report feeling compelled to achieve what's known as the effortless perfection. That is, to be beautiful, fit, popular, smart without any visible effort. Undergraduate women felt overwhelmed by the thought that they should be perfect in all realms of life. College women are also socialized into a culture of romance that emphasizes desirability to a male partner over academic achievement and intellectual development. Gay, lesbian, and transgender students also face peer pressure. Pressure to conform to the conventional gendered identities can be much greater for the LGBTQ students, including the use of bullying. Bullying is a frequent experience in the LGBTQ students at colleges and at universities, yet very few American schools have an LGBTQ inclusive policy in place. There is one here at Georgian College. Single-sex education programs. Well, what about that? Single-sex education programs is dividing, a class of students into boys and girls. Some believe that the single-sex education program may help negate some of the problems associated with gendered criteria. Some statistics show promising results for graduates of single-sex programs. Critics state that a better solution is to ensure that teachers in all schools treat all students equally, since single-sex schools tend to be private and they charge a tuition. What about gendered expectations and the pressures that are facing faculty? Now again, these will be US-based sort of content, but there is this relationship that still exists within Canada, and I'll try to highlight some of that. Some of the pressures facing faculty. Schools are also workplaces. So your college learning environment is my workplace. And so it's important to explore some of the gendered attitudes and practices that affect employees. Now we'll start with what is known as gendered hierarchies. Although most high school and elementary school teachers are female, most administrators and superintendents are male. Now this might be one of the areas that we see some differences in Canada. We have a greater number of women who are deep in elementary school in particular, and some degree in high school. At higher status colleges and universities, most faculty members are white males. Now again, that's a bit more representative of the states. 3/4 of full-time professorships in American colleges and universities are held by males. Female faculty earn 80.6 cents for every dollar male faculty earn. Now in Canada, faculty is faculty. So all faculty make the same amount. It's not based on gender. It is based on education, experience. But in Canada, women typically make about 80 cents to the dollar for most other types of work. Men also highly outnumber women in chief administrative positions. Now, the proportion of male and female faculty and the lack of diversity affects students by limiting available faculty role models. I mean, the number of women in college is greater than the number of men, so wouldn't it make good sense to have more women teaching for those women learning to have role models? Gender bias in evaluation. Well, women and minorities are more likely to be hired when the selection process is blind. That just means that the people doing the hiring don't know who they're hiring by their looks, but only by their credentials. So blind is with respect to the applicant's race, sex, and other characteristics are unknown. Gender bias in evaluation has material consequences. Discrepancies between salaries is big. 3 major sources of bias against women faculty have been identified by researchers. The first, women's performance tends to be more strictly scrutinized than men, making it harder for them to be perceived as competent. Men have to give stronger demonstrations of incompetence in order to be judged by others as incompetent. And then thirdly, male candidates tend to be hired and judged upon whether they show promise. Female candidates tend to be judged on accomplishments which may influence the hiring decision. Now, these forms of subtle discrimination are called invisible hand of discrimination. They're subtle, they're not written down, but that's what makes them the invisible hand of discrimination, or what's known as unwitting discrimination, in applying policies that are not inherently biased. So let's move into this a little bit. Gendered policies and expectations. Within education, policies are based on an outdated family model in which the man is employed outside the home and the woman works inside the home. Male faculty members tend to be evaluated for their skills and ability, where female faculty tend to be evaluated for their gender performance. Now, in terms of earning, now this is what's a bit different. In the States, you can get tenure. You can get a guarantee, if you will, of employment by meeting certain expectations as a faculty. And then you get this long-term support for your position. For female faculty, the tenure clock during the early years of an appointment coincides with the time many women expect to be having children. The standard 6-year tenure clock does not allow adequate time for one or more pregnancies, childbirth, and the repercussions and of childcare responsibilities. Thus, the tenure clock disproportionately penalizes women faculty. Male faculty members who choose to be active parents are sometimes penalized professionally. Some male faculty members do not ask for parental leave for fear of undermining their careers. And that's more of a U.S. issue than it is a Canadian issue. Service expectations for female and minority faculty tend to be greater than for those pressures that are on white males. Since faculty committees are expected to be diverse, women and minorities are asked to serve on more of them than men. So they are not just teaching, but they're on more other meetings in order to be incorporated as part of the diversity plan. So they're stretched thinner. Women and minorities also are being asked to be more help to students because they're more diverse in their background, so they can offer more to students, as it appears. Now, this chapter references a lot of U.S. circumstances, and we can accept that some of these issues do apply to Canada. The more recent political climate in the U.S. has brought some of these issues back into the spotlight, and all the more reason to educate ourselves on our own education. Okay, next week, we're going to explore gendered close relationships. All right, everybody. We're moving along, so hope you're doing well and keep up the good work. Bye now.